Welcome everybody to the fourth episode for 2023 of the Goody Show. And today we're going to be discussing the mental health of seniors. Now this is a very topical and important issue. There are two factors particularly that I want to make people aware of, and of course our guests, who I'll introduce in a minute, already are aware of. Lifespans are increasing, and increasing quite dramatically. For example, over the last 40 years, in 1983, the average lifespan for an Australian, either male or female, combined, was 75 years. In that 40 years, now, 2023, it's 83 years. So, that's a big increase, 8-year on average lifespan increase. Also, second factor, increasingly we have a number of people living beyond the age of 65 years. In 1983, it was 10% of our population that lived beyond 65 years of age. It is now 75. Sorry, not 75, 17%. Little error there, not 75 folks, just 17%. But a 7% increase in 40 years. That's pretty dramatic. And that's causing changes in our society, in the needs of our society in terms of health, mental health, and the very nature of our society. So here today we have two wonderful gentlemen and experts that I've already had a most illuminating conversation with, and very enjoyable. And first of all, a dear friend of mine, Professor Sunil Bhar, that I've had experience with in the past and been very fascinated with what he's had to say in the past. Sunil Bhar is Professor of Clinical Psychology at Swinburne University of Technology. He's an honorary professor at the University of Exeter. He is a registered clinical psychologist specialising in cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT. From 2005 to 2009, he worked with the famous Dr. Aaron Beck, founder of CBT, to deliver and evaluate the efficacy of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, for high-risk populations. He was also a CBT trainer for Philadelphia's community health sector. He is an active research, has an active research lab focusing on examining the effectiveness of CBT for older people. And I might just say that he's won over $3 million in grants to support such research, which I think is very, very important. And one of the therapies that I'm particularly interested in, that he has made mention of in the past, is reminiscence therapy. And we might get an opportunity to talk about that a little later. Also, my other wonderful guest today, who's a great character, is Councillor Richard Lim, OAMJP. And Richard, you have a remarkable CV. You have been a clinical pharmacist for Monash Medical Centre, and you've run a community pharmacy practice in the heart of Springvale since 1991. Your philosophy, I guess, is to give back to the community, and you do that in a great number of ways. For example, as a counsellor for the city of Greater Dandenong, you try to make it a more desirable place for everybody so that they can enjoy our rich culture, that they can have a stronger sense of community, and of course improve the local economy. And I see that apart from just a few little things you do, like improving infrastructure, local education, increasing public safety, you're supporting local community groups, raising awareness of all cultures, which we're going to get you to do more of here at the Mental Health Foundation, and very, very importantly, promoting seniors' mental health. So giving back to the community. And I just quickly say that just 3 of the many committees and community organisations you're involved with: the Australia Day Community Assessment Panel, you're the CEO of Employment and Remuneration Committee, and Community Safety Advisory Committee. So welcome, gentlemen. It is absolutely fabulous to have you here, and your smiling faces absolutely make my day. So we'll get into the guts of the day, so to speak, which is talking about seniors' mental health. And the first issue that I'd like you to consider is social isolation and seniors. Seniors often experience social isolation due to many factors: retirement, loss of loved ones, physical limitations, etc. How can we best address this problem, Sunil? What are your thoughts, particularly in relation to social isolation and loneliness? And I believe your reminiscence therapy fits in very well in this topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we can spend the entire interview
Yeah.
talking about social isolation.
I'm sure.
And the reason for that is it's actually more complicated than it sounds. So for the last 15 years or so, we've had a clinic at Swinburne University called the Wellbeing Clinic for Older Adults. And we send out our postgraduate students to provide counseling and companionship, conversations to older people living in nursing homes. And we've learned that in many of these facilities, their way of dealing with loneliness is to get them to be busy, to get the residents to be busy and involved in activities, and they have bus trips, which is fantastic. But what's missing, we've realized, is that loneliness is not always cured or addressed by busyness, but by visibility. Mm. You've got to be seen and heard in order to feel that you exist.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that we work with feel that they are invisible, that the carers come by, walk through them, essentially. There's very little space for conversation and very little opportunity for the older person to express their identity, their uniqueness. And this is what we hear over and over again as we get older and the people around us die and we lose those connections, we lose those mirrors of our personality. Who are we?
Yes.
And it brings us to the fundamental question, what does it take for someone to feel like themselves? And the answer is to have an audience who validates the uniqueness of the individual and their personality and their identity. And one of the ways in which our counselors and students do that is through something called reminiscence therapy,
Yes.
where they engage the older person, the aged care resident in our case, to talk about their life, to talk about the trials and tribulations, but also the successes and the wisdom that the older person has accumulated over the course of their life. And at the first few minutes of that conversation, we get the typical response: I haven't lived a life of anything to talk about. I haven't done much in my life. And this is an individual who might be in their 90s and beyond, who has lived through countless wars, who has triumphed over adversity. And this is an individual who downplays their achievements. And this, I think, is speaking to the notion of the generation, right?
Yes.
Just get on with life.
Yes.
Don't talk about it. Just get on and do it. But as soon as the counselor starts to ask more probing questions, oh, tell me about the time that you were able to survive that bombing in your area. Or tell me about the relationships that broke for you and how you were able to carry on with your life, caring for your children. We get the narrative of triumph, of survivorship, of creativity, of resilience. And before long, and it takes about 20 minutes, we've timed it, in 20 minutes you see a brightness and a buoyancy emerge. The individual is able to speak about their life in a way that they haven't been able to for such a long time, because they're being put on one bus or another, one activity to another, because the busyness
Yes.
seems to be the antidote, according to many of the people
Yes.
that we come to. It's not the visibility.
Yes.
And so what we've found out is that loneliness or social isolation is not only addressed by activities and connections, but it's by visibility and reminiscing about your life, so that your identity becomes more visible.
That's a wonderful description. This is what excited me the last time
Yes.
I heard you describe it, but I think you've even described it more vividly for me this time, and I'm really excited about that concept, and I'd like to come back to that sometime in the future, but I'll pass over to you, Richard. What are your thoughts about loneliness and social isolation for
Thanks,
the elderly?
Jim. Very perfectly described by Professor.
Wasn't it indeed?
Sunil.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, my point of view, exactly the same point, but I just added in more. To me, my experience, I found out that social interaction, even though you're in a nursing home, the nursing home should take the elderly out to the shopping center to interact with people, friends, whatever, and encourage all the friends, relatives to visit them very frequently. That's the best outcome. Recently, there's a clip I sent to you, the video clip they studied for 7 years. They found out exercise, whatever, blah, 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 is not important as the number one is social integration.
Social.
That's the number one. That live longer. They interview so many elderly in Middle East country. They found out that people live over 100 years old. Mainly those people that been interacting with community, went to shopping, say hello to postman, say hello to this person, that person. Doesn't matter who. Even I don't know who you ask, still hello, how are you, catch up, this and that.
And I
But
bet a lot of people come to your pharmacy just for that very reason, to say hello to Richard Lim and get some sort of, they would be encouraged in their identity, as you're saying, Sunil, but in meeting you, I'm sure.
correct. Yeah, 100% correct. They come to see me. Normally they want to socialize, to
Yeah.
discuss about their family, their problem, ask me to read.
You're more than a pharmacist.
Correct, more than a pharmacy, like a lot of politicians describe my pharmacy as community hub. Like provide so many services from reading the what we call reading the letter from the Social Security Department, explaining them about how to be healthy, what is their problem, and also sign paperwork like for Miss Justice Peace, my pharmacist as well. Do all sort of social working, social worker type of job. That's how they make them happy. And also I've been invited very frequently this Friday again. Springwell Italian Senior Citizen Club invited me all the time to give me a short speech. They laugh, and so on and so on. Because that social interaction, we keep telling them, when you come together, we encourage you to live in a primitive lifestyle. We live as a group. We are animal kingdom in a group. Now we try to isolate ourselves only. We try to live by ourselves. We don't even know our neighbors. That's a problem.
The curse of the nuclear family.
Correct. Yeah, the modern, it's not a modern lifestyle. It's a new civilization. It's not a backward type of civilization that causes all this sort of problem. Isolation, this sort of thing. Therefore, Italian club, they're so happy. They invite me all the time to be there, to give a speech. Therefore, they love that. The reason why, when I talk, I give a speech a little bit Italian, they laugh, they do and so on. And so on. I said, look, all of you, listen to what I said. You're laughing. Your brain release happy chemical. Oxytocin first, serotonin, after dopamine, because you really want to dance like anything. They are between 70 to 90 years old plus. They dancing like crazy, and after that endorphin come up as well. They don't feel tired, they feel happy, they step on each other's toe, they don't even feel painful until they get home. That's endorphin. Therefore, four chemical is oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. You want to achieve something, you want to dance as lovely as possible, and the final chemical is endorphin, make you feel addicted to exercise, to dancing, those sort of things, how you live longer, and so many more that I can't say, but probably stop here, because that's Professor Sunil said, because we have to reminisce about the past. Yeah, I always encourage them to tell the past, and you want monash children, you must give a certificate of appreciation by donate a lot of money to monash children. And I said, no, I don't need that money. No, you keep it. One day, when you go to a nursing home, you look at your certificate of operation, how many you have, how many you have done for the community, how much you're helping, clean up Australia Day, blah, 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 blah. That's how they're happy with, okay, encourage to donate. When donate and kindness make you happy, release more happy chemicals.
I think we could talk about this issue for a long
one.
time.
It's a big issue.
It's probably one of the central issues about ageing and the mental health of elderly.
Correct.
In my view, anyway.
Thank you.
Perhaps I have agreement on both parties with this one. Yeah. Moving on, access to mental health services. There's a need to ensure that seniors have access to affordable and appropriate mental health services. This includes obviously providing information about those available services, resources available, and so forth. Now, we've had a recent Royal Commission, and the focus was very much on youth mental health, which of course is critically important. Yet the highest suicide rates are in elderly men. There are many mental health problems that elderly people have, and I sort of think, that we do need to look at those issues and not discount them. What are your thoughts, Sunil?
As you said, that we don't think of older people having these problems. There was a interesting study some years ago with the title, "The Portrayal of Older People in Walt Disney Animated Movies." And when you think about the title, I think it's a great title. It makes you think, as we grew up and we watched these animated movies, who were the central characters? They were younger people. Older people were the peripheral characters, the evil stepmother, the quirky dwarf. They were the side characters, supporting acts for the protagonist, for the main show,
Yes.
the younger person.
Yes.
And I think this kind of ageism
Yes.
has filtered through every level of our existence. When we think of education, we think of educating the young person. When we think of physical health, we think of youth as the embodiment of that health. And we think of mental health problems, we again focus to the younger generations. We almost discount the idea that life continues after 65, right? And now, as we look at your statistics, on average, we're living till about our mid-80s, but really, more and more people are living past 100.
Yes.
So if someone retires at the age of 65, they've got a whole chapter of their life to go.
Yep, to
a
go.
whole chapter. But we don't think about what that chapter comprises and what the issues are. And in fact, some of the statistics are staggering and surprising, like the one that you mentioned, that if you are an older man, your risk of suicide is the highest compared to any other demographic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet a lot of our policies, a lot of our research, and a lot of our clinical thinking is on the younger 20-year-old who's at risk of suicide. And I think that that speaks to this notion that if you're older, you're more easily forgotten.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And yet we know that depression is treatable, that suicide prevention programs do work, but we now need to be creative in reaching people at their later years. Because being old does not mean you have to be depressed. Being old does not mean that you have to be mentally ill. And being old does not mean that there's nothing that we can't do for you, right? There are programs out there, but we need to be creative in how we reach those older adults, and we need to normalize the idea that mental health care is for everyone,
Yes.
not just for the younger person.
Yes. Yes. And you've discussed this before, haven't you? That really the amount of respect that the elderly people get nowadays is perhaps less than you were mentioning this earlier on, less than what you would have given to your parents or your grandparents, etc. You've noticed this phenomena.
I noticed very, very clearly after 43 years in Australia, I found that the respect to the elderly keep declining to teachers, principal, policemen, those sort of things. It's not right. The way, I'm not blaming school, probably I don't know how education department structuring the way they teach the student nowadays. Probably part of the parenting as well. They spoil their children, like end up with lack of respect to the elderly. But I always think the elderly people is the most important. 65 plus 70, very important, because they the one build the country.
And if you're not
Maybe-
respected, you're not going to be very, well mentally, are you? Psychologically, it's going to make you feel inferior or in some way inadequate or obviously not as supported
Correct.
by your community.
Correct, that's a vicious circle. If you
It's a vicious
don't respect
circle.
your parent, well, later on your children not going to respect you either. That's probably what I think. And secondly, to me, to do with elderly is very important because baby booming is very important to our community. They the one work so hard, build the country and so on and so on. But from my point of view, elderly should have the same healthcare system, the same provide services
Yes.
like other. Like yesterday, I attended, on Sunday, I attended with Claire O'Neill. She organized what we call Women Health Forum. That's a good one that we should do for mental health for elderly. The reason we want to raise awareness to the government. Like, I give you an example of women's health, because they invite Assistant Minister of Health and also one of the CEO, what we call her name is Dr. White, the CEO of Gene Health. The idea is just to as everyone share the problem, your story. We invite, maybe we can invite all our elderly that age is 65 plus and so on, come along, listen, let the politician listen to them. Yeah? Listen to them, what they want, what they require for the health, and what they want our government to help them. And after that, these two member of parliament have to take all the messages to the government to change the policy. Because my feeling, personally, we should look after elderly than anyone else, honestly, because they're they're very important to our country. That's what my point of view only. Because parenting nowadays, we don't really teach the kid how to respect the elderly. I feel so bad. That's why elderly have a high rate of suicide, because they're isolated, they lost their self-esteem. They used to be, what we call a leader in a family, Yeah.
So this is probably a good point for me to go on to the third question
Yep,
and
all
talk about stigma. And if you continue then, the stigma surrounding mental health, the negative attitude that seniors perhaps still hold about mental health, that perhaps younger generation are less likely to hold. That seniors don't want to be challenged or to admit that they might have a mental health problem, because that's not the generation, the generation that just we're just going to get on with it, and that's sort of the baby boomer mentality in a way, isn't it? I mean, your mentality and my mentality. We'll forget about this young guy over here.
He's too young.
He's yeah, but brilliant.
Brilliant man.
But
man.
so many seniors are reticent to admit their mental health issues. They still regard it as a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Which I think younger people are increasingly less likely, well, hopefully less likely to do so. What are your comments about that? What are your thoughts about that?
To me,
How do we get older people to say, listen, I have a problem, and go and seek help?
our generation, elderly generation, they don't want to accept that, because that's the way we brought up, And also, especially in diverse community, multicultural community, they want to accept that. They think that it's very shameful to accept that they have mental health, especially in Asian community, honestly. Therefore, they always hiding, they keep into themselves. That's a problem. But to me, now we encourage, as a pharmacist, as a counselor, we encourage them to speak out, to tell us what is your problem. Just don't feel shameful. Just say whatever you have to say, because depression and mental health is a disease. It's not shameful at all. But because we come from different part of the world, we get used to the culture that very strict. We don't want to say that, otherwise they think that you're crazy.
But you're an educated medical man.
Yep.
You understand that. Many people, many baby boomers don't have that medical background, that medical knowledge to understand the biology, if you like, the psychology of mental health issues that put it firmly in the disorder, illness category.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I keep telling them. What you do, you have to follow my social media, talk about my community only. I keep teaching them how to raise the level of serotonin in the brain and bring down the stress level, not the stress hormone like cortisol, whatever. That's the best way to do it. But secondly, you have to accept that. Even myself in the health profession, honestly, from the beginning, I never accepted it. I do know that I'm depressed. I went through a lot of stressful time during my study at university, working in factories, on.
Sure.
But after a while, I said, well, that's life. You can't deny that. You can't in the state of denial all the time. Therefore, I think, elderly have to encourage them to speak out, because they are very important. They are living treasure for me. They are living treasure. You have to take care of them. The government must put a lot of time and effort and money to look after the elderly, because they the one our living treasure.
Let's leave it on that, living treasure. I love that term. What are your thoughts?
Well, I love the way you explained it, because I think that for the older man, they'd far more be able to appreciate why it's useful to regulate biochemistry than to regulate emotions. And we've discovered this in our work, that when you work with the older generation, not only do you have age that speaks to the stigma of mental health conditions, but sometimes you have gender with their own associations that men are more reluctant to seek
Yes.
any kind of help than women, we found. And then when you put in the diversity issues, you get all the cultural impositions as well, that if you're living with mental health problems, you are possessed, you are weak, right? And you deserve to be locked up. And in fact, I remember in my childhood growing up in Asia, that was the case in some of the extended families. You had an aunt who was living in the back room and no one spoke of her, right? And now, 50 years later, I think she was going through a clinical depression.
Yes.
But she was just known as the strange one.
I've heard of a very similar story
Right.
recently, actually, from a friend of mine who said almost an identical
Yeah.
situation.
And so no wonder if you're an older person coming from that background, you're not going to be saying, I'd like to see a psychologist. Because you've got this aunt in your mind, right? I'm going to be known as the strange one. But we think we have a way forward. We've got to present things in the way that you have, in language that is not dangerous for the individual, not frightening. Instead of saying, would you like some therapy? Why not saying, let's have a chat? Instead of saying, here's a psychologist, why don't you say, here's a well-being person, right, who can look after your health in all forms. What an interesting way of approaching mental health in destigmatizing
Yes.
language.
Yes, yes.
And we found that often when we approach people living in nursing homes, we don't say, would you like counseling? We say, would you like a chat? Right? And often what you find is that the service provider is 2 or 3 generations younger than the patient, right? And so instead of the service provider coming in there and saying, I'm here to offer you help, the service provider says, I'm here to learn from you. Tell me more about your life. Or I've got another patient going through a difficult time. What advice do you think I could give them? And when you engage the older person in that way,
That's very interesting.
both people emerge from that relationship richer with something to gain. And it's a more transactional relationship. It's not the older person receiving or giving. Both parties are very equal in that relationship. We think that's a better way of approaching it
I think
than
it-
saying to the older person, you're weak, you need help, I'm here to give you that
I
help.
really hadn't considered it in that way, but that sounds like a wonderful approach to me, quite frankly. I would certainly put my hand up for that sort of therapy, put it that way.
Let me add one more word
Please.
to Professor. To me, the way we approach, the way we communicate, very important in my pharmacy, very important. Why we won Pharmacy of the Year in 2013, because we won 2 awards, 3 awards, but we won 2 awards, the whole country. The Pharmacy of the Year and Community Engagement of the Year. The reason I always teach my staff how to say, what to say, when to say. People have depression come on antidepressant. We never said you are depressed. Diverse community never accepted that. They said, oh, the doctor give you a medication just to help you, to make you feel better, to make you happy. And some people understand, a bit educated, they say, oh, they change your chemical in the brain because depression is not you are crazy, because just the brain release certain chemical more than the other.
It's another organ.
Yeah, the organ here. Therefore, this tablet going to raise the other happy chemical up and bring the stress hormone down. That's all, and they're very happy. Therefore, we always say that. Now I'm in the council, I provide a lot of ideas to different diverse communities as well. I always tell them to say whatever I said, because in city of Rajanong we have 158 nationalities and 200 languages spoken. I work very closely with the CEO now to buy software when we went conference recently to translate to so many languages. I think they can access to. I encourage every councillor talk to your local GP or pharmacist to provide health seminar on the regular basis. Your ward responsibility, your ward. Nothing wrong to do once a month or every couple of months. Invite local pharmacists or GP to come to give a speech. And they promote themselves too. And our residents understand what is mental health.
It's a win-win.
Win-win situation, that both win-win. Thankfully.
Now, we're going to have to cover these last 2
Yeah.
because we're running a little bit late on our schedule. And this one is about ageism and discrimination. And just what I've noticed on social media is a tendency to hold older people responsible for some of the environmental difficulties and issues that we're having at the moment. There's a tendency, maybe this is my imagination, correct me if I'm wrong, that perhaps we had a less stressful work life, we had better employment conditions easier access to housing. And I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are on that. Do you sort of get that sense that maybe there's well, you guys had it easy, and for us it's more difficult. It's harder. It's complex life now. But you guys, as the older generations, had a soft ride, and we're paying for it. And maybe that's not very good for people's mental health either. It sort of devalues them and their contribution and what they've done over their lives and their story, their narrative, which you were talking about, their reminiscence, their perception of themselves. Who'd like to go first on that one?
I was hoping you'd go first.
Yeah, I can go first.
Yeah.
To me, in our generation and our old generation, it's not easy at all. Their life is not easy, harder than now. That's what I think. But we learn to accept it. That's life. Anything we accepted it. Doesn't matter how hard it is to work. We're more resilient. We're challenging all the time. Doesn't matter what. We always challenge. Young generation very comfortable. Okay, they don't have this longevity gene in their body at all because they've been comfortable from parent point of view, from everything. They have so much right nowadays.
Be careful, we've got young people in the audience, they might attack us.
Sorry, it's a small percentage, small percentage of young one. Okay. Secondly, the IT cause more problem. All these gadgets.
Yes.
That's what my point of view on, my personal point
That's
of
an
view.
issue we haven't even touched
Correct.
on, but it's a very important
Yeah,
issue
I
for
said
older people.
Quickly, old people, they don't really, because these sort of things very addictive.
Oh.
And they are more addictive than cocaine or morphine or ice. This is pharmacologically speaking. That's how the problem is so addicted. You try to enjoy the social media here and there, 2 or 3 hours gone without it. You feel like you waste your time. For us, for them, they love to go there. And they want to follow the social media, make them feel even more stressful. That's how, and the bully, cyberbully, that's another problem. It's not, to me, lifestyle of the young generation a lot easier than us. That's what I see. I came to Australia later on. I talk about my story later on in another time. I went through a lot of hard time. But for here, everything, okay, that's fine, encourage, but don't tell them about the consequence. You can't even say that, oh, you failed, you passed, because you can't be numbered, oh, you are captain, you get 80%, you can't say that. You play sport, you have to, reward.
Everybody's a winner.
Have to be winners, but even if you're a winner, it's no point again. You not work hard, you not challenge yourself. Therefore, young generation, because the gadget control them. This IT control them, technology control them. For us, we control the technology. Okay, we put aside. At night time, I go to sleep. Why they can't sleep? Because they on all night. The brain keep don't release serotonin in the brain all day, all the night. Therefore, they disrupt the body clock cycle. Okay, because circadian rhythm. That's the problem. And they always have one this, one that, but they don't challenge, they don't work hard like us. To me, the other way around. We are work harder, we face a lot of adversity, where a young one, not really, but how we going to change their mentality, how we stop them. Like other countries, they stop, allow you to use we don't know, China is too rough, by not allow you to use mobile phone for 1 or 2 hours a week, whatever. It's not that way. We have to educate them to be bad and the consequence of using this IT. You have to know. This is very useful. I have two. I run a council, I run the council, a social media, a health seminar, and charity. Just now come back from the Kids Safe as well. We ministered also. I run around like metric, but I enjoy what I'm doing. That I'm happy. That's the most important. You try your best. You want to achieve as much as you can each day.
Stay happy. Stay
By
happy.
doing that, you're happy, like I said just now. The number one, live longer, more than 100 years old, or stay active. You, later we can touch up with that about the Okinawa Island, whatever, Okinawa Island. You can see the second one is family, loved one. Always cherish each other, sharing the problem, contact each other. That number two that live longer. And come down to exercise, not number maybe 5, 6, 7. You see, therefore, how to increase this happy chemical on it. That's what my personal point.
I like it. I like it. Sunil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the happy chemical.
I like the happy
Can we get some?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll order some bottles of that. We'll share them.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think we need to do that. We just need to relate and get socially connected and have meaningful conversations, and we produce that happy chemical. This is your point, isn't it?
Great, that's my point.
The interesting thing about your question is that I think there are stereotypes on both sides of the generation. Older people think younger people have it easy, and younger people think older people have had it easy.
Yeah.
And all stereotypes are dehumanizing, aren't they?
Yeah.
In fact, when you think of older people, you're including anyone really who's over the age of 65. That's the most common definition.
Yes, yes.
And you've got three generations right there, right? You
Yes.
can have a grandparent, a parent, and a child, all who meet that age definition
Yes.
of older people.
Yes.
And so as soon as we talk about seniors and older people, we enter into this stereotype of homogenizing a very diverse group of
Yes.
people,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
The issues that the 85 pluses have experienced are quite different to the 60-year-olds.
Absolutely.
Right.
Certainly.
And yet they're all banded together from a policy level, from a health arrangement level as
Very good
older
point,
people.
isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is something that I often find myself having to remind my colleagues and my students that when you talk about older people,
Yeah.
by definition, you're destined to fail because whatever you say is going to be relevant to some people and
As
completely
you say, that gap
irrelevant
from
to others.
65 to say 85, if you were to apply that 20-year gap from a 15-year-old to a 35-year-old, is huge.
And we don't do that.
And we don't.
We don't talk about 15-year-olds and 40-year-olds in the same breath.
no.
We talk about teenagers, young adults, older adults in terms of the younger group. But somehow we make the mistake, don't we, of talking about seniors and older people as if they're one group.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think this is a problem with all stereotypes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to use a stereotype. Yet again, the tendency for 70-year-olds and plus or older people, however we are going to, for the moment, define that anyway, to withdraw from healthy lifestyle habits and in fact to be encouraged by some people. I've just mentioned this doctor from the US, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, who advocates, in fact, people over the age of 75 no longer seeking treatment for medical conditions. He's actually saying if he had cancer after the age of 75, he would no longer seek treatment. To me, that's not a very good message because if you can be well enough to enjoy a reasonable quality of life, whether you're being treated for cancer, is that really any different from a 25-year-old enjoying a reasonable quality of life, even though they're being treated for cancer? I'm not sure. There's a message there that maybe life is not worth living after a certain age. What's your feeling about about such?
I mean, the general message is that you're more dispensable if you're older.
Yeah.
You're more useless if
Yes.
you're older. For some reason, we don't regard babies as being dispensable and useless, but we do that with older people, that if you can't be productive in society, if you can't do all the sorts of things that you might have been able to do as a younger person, you're more dispensable. Life
Of
is
course,
not
you can
worth-
do other things, can't you? And you have a lifetime of experience
Yes.
and wisdom and so on. I mean, I know at my age there are many more things that I'm much more confident about doing now that I was not confident about doing in my 20s, for example.
Yeah.
That just develops over time, I guess. I guess the rough edges get knocked off and things become a little bit smoother. Not saying I'm smooth.
I think in some societies we tend to value that more
Yeah.
than others, and you've touched on this. I think in Western communities we don't tend to value concepts such as wisdom and the experience that you've built and your status as an elder as much as they do in other communities.
Yes, yes.
And maybe some of that devaluing starts to be self-imposed as well. When you start to think of yourself as an older person, let's say 75
Yes,
plus,
yes.
you think, well, maybe life isn't worth saving at
Yes.
that point, which is a version of self-stereotyping, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. I must say it is something that we learn from our Indigenous brothers and sisters, the concept of an elder. I mean, elder is, your auntie, your uncle, you are an older person and you are respected because of that experience. And
Yeah.
that seems to be at great odds with, shall we say, the Western aspect of our community, our society. Thank you, thank you. Richard, what are your thoughts?
My thought is, if we look after ourselves, we can live over 100 years. Honestly, I talk about longevity gene again. To me, his point of view, the Dr. Ezekiel, is not right. I don't agree with because a lot of people now can live longer than that. Average age in Australia, 87 years old.
It's strange that he put a figure on it too.
Yeah,
Why
number
did he
three
pick that?
in the world. Because I follow up all the time. We are number 3 in the world. The population that live longer in the world is Australia, number 3.
Yeah.
Number 1, Monaco. Number 2, Japanese. Drop to number 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Us, we are number 3 in the world. Monaco, number 1, because there's small population.
Yeah.
They are rich people. They know
Yeah.
how to look after themselves.
True.
I can talk all sort of how to stay active and live longer for over 100 years, no problem.
I knew
have-
Japan was high. Monaco
Yes.
surprises
Yeah,
me. That's
100 years
interesting.
old, easy. To live longer to over 100 years old, no problem. You see, you can see.
And America's declined, I believe.
You know why? Lifestyle disease.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, because we live to eat, all right? But we don't follow the rule of we eat to live.
Yeah.
That's the problem. I have to follow the primitive lifestyle.
Not very impressed with the American diet of burger
Correct.
and fries.
We are copy from them. Look, every fast food from where? From a junkie from America. Is that television too?
You
All
would,
the
of
rubbish.
course, recommend Chinese cuisine.
Correct, but Chinese cuisine have to learn how to cook properly too. Sometimes they modify no good. You go to Springvale, authentic food and original food, and also very
You'll have to give me some hints on that one.
Come along. I invite you personally. Come along to Springvale. I take you to so many restaurants in Springvale. Lost count. Different.
I think we're getting off the track now,
Okay,
which
no problem.
probably means that it's a good time to finish our
Okay.
discussion.
Okay.
I think.
I just got
What
quick
you've
one.
got?
Okay, so just quick one. Okay.
A quick one.
The thing that elderly, I think the old people are very important, should add into this one. Because we should organize health, what we call the safety forum or health forum, whatever it is, whatever forum, to invite elderly to give the young one their experience, their basic experience.
Are you suggesting that for the Mental Health Foundation
Correct,
to do this?
correct.
Okay.
Because
We've
that
got a
makes-
CEO in the room here. He might be listening.
Care, by doing that, the elderly likes mental health because it's more important to give to young generation about their experience, their achievement, You see, you are principal of primary school. Who know who you are? Or school, I don't know, high school, primary school. But who know that you express yourself back to your the reminiscence, therapy. You come, you show them, you tell them how to be successful, blah, blah, blah. You've been through a lot of hard time, resilient, whatever.
Maybe the 5 most important things you've
Correct.
learned in your life.
Correct. I have 5 points, but I can't say go too long now. I have 5 points to.
We'll get you back.
Okay, go back one day. Therefore, that's the most important to me. I read book we call Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, it's all small stuff, the best-selling book. One part, he said that you should ask your friend, relative, especially your father or your mother, about their experience. Therefore, you don't have to go through the hard time. But you get a bit of lecturing for sure, but the outcome is humongous. You see? That's one we want to increase the awareness of how important the elderly are. That's what my point. Make them more proud, they want to increase the happy chemical. The young one respect them too, because they learn from them.
And it's another form of the reminiscence therapy.
That's right. That's right, but in
Sunil's been-
different way. But you
In a-
just
yeah.
Now, Pasan the CEO organize a mental health forum to the young one and the old one, but invite the old one to give a speech there, to give a speech about their achievement in life, been through Second World War, blah blah blah, so many. Like you, how can you become a principal? You must be facing a lot of adversities and a lot of hard work, but those of things. That's make you win-win situation both ways. The young one learn from you. They don't have to go through the hard time.
It was a blood sport, Richard, I can tell you.
Sorry, I feel oh, okay. Blood.
Maybe I have to end it there. gentlemen.
Thank you.
I think this has been the most fun interview that I've had the pleasure of being involved in. So I really want to thank you so much, Professor Sunil, and you, Councillor
Thank
Richard.
you. Thank
It's
you.
been wonderful, and I'll take you up on that Chinese restaurant.
Correct.
Okay.
Cambodian restaurant even tastes better.
Cambodian restaurant.
And more healthier.
And more healthy too.
Yep, one day I talk about what food the best in the world, how to stay healthy, not gain weight. I want to talk about no time about what is calorie, what the GI,
Next
what
one.
is.
Next
Yeah.
one.
Okay, next one.
Next one. That,
Okay.
diet and mental health.
Yep,
And
diet
chemistry.
and mental health.
Diet and mental
Live
health.
longer, over 100 years, I guarantee.
Wonderful.
Don't say that, but the last one, just to. I can't guarantee.
Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately we're going to have to end it there. So next month we will return. However, I don't think we'll be better than this time, but we will return. We'll do our best.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.